Spoom and the doctors there. So good to see you.
Good to see you, team. I'm wondering what's happening. When are we starting?
I was told to wait for a signal.
We can start. We are live.
For live. Molweni, sanibonani, dumelang apshene. Greetings of joy on this glorious day in Gauteng, in South Africa. We are about to start. We are starting, as a matter of fact, this celebration of Professor Njabulo Ndebele, and we deemed it fit as the CCT Group Theological Reflection that we look back and see the contributions that have been made by those who came before us. And we pause and say a word of gratitude that we see you, we have seen your work, we admire you, we're grateful, this grateful nation, therefore, thanks Professor Njabulo Ndebele. And I will talk briefly after the prayer, but for now, one wise theologian once told me that there are three institutions that make for a refined human being. And I submit that I never contested that. I assumed that he was correct. It was Dr. Simon Gobule. He said to me, it is the church, it's the family, it's the school, education. So now we go to the church, the formation of us, because all things begin with God. And Reverend Yeni, can you please open with a prayer? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I greet you, all the esteemed members present, and the reverends, the clergy at large. I greet you all in the name of Jesus Christ. Before I pray, I would like to take a little bit of a word from the book of Exodus 3, verse 8. Where it reads as follows: So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from the land to a good and a large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, and then etc. Before I pray, I think it will be very important so that we are able to understand that freedom without land, without the economy, in this instance, the milk, the land flowing with milk and honey, the freedom in God's term, it has to have land, it has to have the economy, it has to have sustainability. As we reflect on the journey of the legends, young people like me are also reflecting according to God's terms and God's pillars when it comes to freedom. It will be a great pleasure for me and many others to hear from the legends on the journey that brought us to where we are, and to also learn from their experiences so that we also build a way going forward as a nation, with God guiding us throughout and through. Shall we then pray? Baba Nkulunkulu egameni lika Jesu siyathandaza kuwe, unguNkulunkulu ophilayo, unguNkulunkulu okhulumayo, unguNkulunkulu olizwayo izwi lesizwe, unguNkulunkulu olizwayo izwi labantu bonke. Sisahlangene namhlanje sithandazela uNkulunkulu ukuthi uvule ukukhanya kithi, sizwe ukukhuluma kwakho ngokuphelele. Kulekela uNkulunkulu ukuthi uphinde wenisele imvula yokuqonda nemvula yokushisekela njenganalobo bokuqala awukade ubakhiphile ukuthi bakhambele inkululeko yethu. Akhake uNkulunkulu enhliziyweni zethu intshisekelo entsha, siphinde siqhubeke nakona konke kufanele siqhubeke nako. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Reverend Yeni, that you have invited God in our midst, so that all that we seek to do today has got the blessings of the one who has created us. Thank you so much. And knowing that Professor Njabulo Ndebele is also a Christian himself, so this is really fitting. We will move to the next slot, which is Professor Zide, who will introduce Professor Ndebele. Before I do so, when we talk about Professor Ndebele, we talk about the embodiment of Black philosophy. We talk about a novelist. We talk about an author. We talk about one of those leading intellectuals, not only found here in South Africa, but indeed within the rest of the continent. Many of us, when we grew up knowing the name Njabulo Ndebele, not knowing the face, of course. But over time, as life would happen, we met this giant, and he's done extraordinary work. So I want to emphasize why the CCT Theological Reflections deemed it fit to honor him. And I know that Professor Zide will talk extensively about the amazing and extraordinary work of Professor Ndebele. I mean, his body of work really is massive. We can never even begin to scratch the surface today, but our intention is to pause and honor and celebrate him. Sometimes as Black people who are accused of not honoring and seeing each other, but today and many other days that will follow, we want to say that's not true of us. We honor our heroes, we celebrate our heroes. This is why we have congregated here this evening. And I was so delighted to see many, especially one of his dearest friends, Dr. Dandala. The Dandala family is here. And I know that having had the privilege of interviewing Professor Ndebele, he speaks very fondly of them and many other families. And as you would also know, Professor Ndebele is the outgoing chairman of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I know that Professor Zide will give us a lot of nuance around it. But I thought that for those who are asking, why are we here? We're here to honor the legends of our freedom. We're here to say we have seen their work, we admire their work, and the generation that comes after the likes of Professor Ndebele, perhaps my generation, and the one that comes after us, we can never say we're never shown what to do. We can never say we don't know what to do. What we can do is to honor what Frantz Fanon once said, every generation has a duty, and we're trying to learn from the ones who have walked before us. And without much further ado, Professor Zide, please introduce Professor Ndebele to us, and from Professor Zide, we'll hand over to Professor Ndebele himself. Come at the man, come at the moment. Professor Zide, over to you. Professor Zide?
Thank you very much. Hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay,
yes, we
thank
can.
you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It is indeed an honor and a privilege for me that I've been requested by the CCTR group to introduce this son of the soil, son of Africa, Professor Njabulo Ndebele, whom I've known for many years through our relationship and association with Professor Mbulelo Mzamane. I came to know the kind of a person he is. Prof Ndebele was, his father was also Njabulo, Nimrod Njabulo Ndebele, and his mother was Nomakosazana Regina Shabangu. Prof Ndebele married Ausmpo Kathleen Malebu on the 30th of July, 1971. And the two of them were blessed with one son and two daughters. Prof Ndebele, as early as 1973, was awarded a Bachelor of Arts in English and Philosophy by what was then called UBSL, which is University of Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland. You know, why University of Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland? Botswana at the time had no university. Swaziland had no university. And so citizens of these universities all studied at Maseru, which was then called Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland. And of course, there were South Africans also studying at that university. That Bachelor of Arts in English and Philosophy was followed by a Master of Arts in English Literature by the University of Cambridge in 1975. Still very thirsty for knowledge, Prof Ndebele did not say, well, I've studied in Cambridge, now this is it. But that master's degree was followed by a Doctor of Philosophy in Creative Writing by the University of Denver in 1983, University of Denver in the United States of America. He also studied at Churchill College, University of Cambridge, where he was the first recipient of South African bursary. Prof Njabulo Ndebele was Vice Chancellor and Principal, as we all know, of the University of Cape Town from 2000 to 2008, following a tenure as a scholar and a resident at the Ford Foundation headquarters in New York. He joined the foundation in September 1998, immediately after a 5-year term of office as Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of the North in Sovenga. University of the North is where the famous 1972 strike took place following a speech of Mkhoputsi Tiro, which led to him being tortured and ultimately left the country for Botswana, where a parcel bomb killed him. So Prof Ndebele comes from that kind of background. And then, of course, that was followed. He's also served as Vice Rector of the University of the Western Cape, and earlier positions included Chair of the Department of African Literature at the University of Witwatersrand and a Pro-Vice Chancellor, Dean and Head of English Department at the National University of Lesotho. Now plowing back to the university that produced him, remember now the University of UBSL is called University of Lesotho. He's an esteemed novelist, as T said, and Professor Ndebele published The Cry of Winnie Mandela in 2004, which is really a critical acclaim. There are some people who have not written much about Mama Winnie, but Prof Ndebele is one of those very bold and quiet, humble scholars who felt the need to write something very positive about Mama Winnie Mandela. An earlier publication of Fools and Other Stories won the Noma Award, which is Africa's highest literary award for the best book published in Africa in 1984. His highly influential essays on South African literature and culture were published in a collection, Rediscovery of the Ordinary. I wish we could read that. Prof Ndebele served as the president of Congress of South African Writers for many years. As a public figure, he is known for his incisive insights in commentaries on a range of public issues in South Africa. Prof Ndebele is also a key figure in South African higher education. He has served as chair of the South African Universities Vice Chancellors Association from 2002 to 2005, and served on the executive board of the Association of African Universities since 2001. I will come back to his tenure as a South African Higher Education Institute a little later. He has done public service in South Africa in the areas of broadcasting policy, school curriculum history, and more recently as chair of Government Commission on the development and use of African languages as media of instruction in South Africa. He served as president of the AAU from 2005 to 2009 and was the chair of the South African Regional Universities Association. He's also a fellow of UCT. He holds a number of honorary doctorates from universities in the United Kingdom, Netherlands, Japan, South Africa, and the United States. The University of Cambridge awarded him an honorary doctorate in law in 2006, and he was made an honorary fellow of Churchill College in 2007. In 2008, the University of Michigan awarded him another honorary doctorate in law. He's really a man of many letters. As we have said that he has published quite extensively, Prof Ndebele, amongst his many works, we're just going to cite a few. Fine Lines from the Box, Further Thoughts About Our Country, The Cry of Winnie Mandela, as we have already mentioned, that he has written quite extensively about Mama Mandela. Africans Must Treasure Their Literature, which was in the Independent of the 30th June 2002. He has written about the prophetess Umprofeti and the death of a son, Bonolo and the Peach Tree, Sarah, Rings and I, Rediscovery of the Ordinary, Essays on the South African Literature and Culture, Fools and Other Stories. Prof Ndebele contributed to Chimuranga magazine. Prof Ndebele is an embodiment of humility. You know, in South Africa, particularly amongst us Black public speakers or academics, we've got this sense of superiority complex. But Prof Ndebele is one of the humblest Black professors I've ever come across with. He's not full of himself. He's always very respectful. And most importantly about him is his capacity to listen. He is an academic par excellence. Prof Ndebele is a paragon of excellence, and particularly on Black excellence. And that is why many scholars, particularly Black scholars, and even white scholars, look up to him as a role model. Prof Ndebele is a literary giant, as his works speaks volumes of the kind of a person he is. You know, in the early 2000s, when he served as the chairperson of the South African Vice Chancellors Association, I used to marvel at the conversations they would have with the late Professor Mzamane. Mbulelo was his very close friend, as well as Professor Mushengon. Mbulelo would say to him, you know, we are now going to a meeting of Saufka, and Prof Ndebele would correct him and say, it's Safka. And Mbulelo would say, Njabulo, I said Savuka. And so they would really engage in those kinds of discussion, but he was really, and he still is, you know, a Black giant amongst academics. You know, during that time, the Saufka had a medium of instruction of conversation, rather, of English and Afrikaans. One session was held in Afrikaans and another one in English. But he was amongst those who fought for the use of English in order for all Africans attending the SAFCA meetings should really follow the conversations. They were very, very vocal. And of course, he led that conversation in his very simple and humble manner. One would, of course, I said, listen to him and Mbulelo, as well as Moshe Ngondo, exchanging ideas, particularly on African literature. You know, if you look at literary giants, Prof Ndebele falls in the category of the Aikwe Amwa, Chinua Achebe, Eske Mpahlele, Mbulelo Mzamani, of course, Mushankolo, as well as Langa Peteni. You know, those are really the African scholars which the country should be proud of. And so I am very humbled, colleagues, to present to you none other than Professor Njabulo Ndebele. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof Zide. And I wish there were mothers and women to ululate at this moment. I had to interject because I've got goosebumps that amongst us, there's a lot of greatness. And I was thinking, Dr. Dandala Sispumzile, they will ululate at this moment as we call upon the tantalizing sound of African dreams at this moment, because we're so grateful and happy. Thank you so much, Professor Zide, for that. It felt like a book on its own. Storytelling is really our wings, as Chinua Achebe once said. Now to you, Professor Njabulo Ndebele. Can we open the Zoom, those on Zoom? We clap for this moment as Professor Njabulo Ndebele is going to be talking to us, giving us reflections. I saw many people on the Zoom, faces I recognize and names I recognize. Can we do that even if we do it by using emojis, clapping? He comes, as they say in the United Kingdom, cometh the moment, cometh the man. And we're so grateful. Abakwazi and Minage, they chased me out of a choir. So I can't ululuzela now, yizela. But Professor Ndebele, in our shortcomings of unable to ululate for you, we are doing so silently on behalf of your mother, on behalf of all those who gave back to you. Over to you, Prof. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly
Okay,
loud and
thank you.
clear. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for those kind words of introduction. And you helped me a lot by ensuring that two very dear friends are there, because to prop me up with some confidence at the beginning of this talk. And one always approaches these commitments with some trepidation and hoping that one I'll do my best. And thank you so much, Professor Zide, for your introductory comments. And we fought the good fight together in those days. And it's wonderful that we are still at it. Just to begin, I plan to talk about on the theme of belonging, and perhaps to begin with a disclaimer that I feel compelled to recall a book under my name. I think reference has been made to it, published as a rediscovery of the ordinary, with the subtitle Essays on South African Literature and Culture. I do not and have never experienced myself as a legend, but there is nothing I can do about it if there are others who think differently. I accept that it is a positive attribution, but one such as I would never ascribe to myself, but grateful that there are others who hold a different opinion from the one that I hold of myself. Being a grandson of two priests on my mother's side and on my father's side, I have learned not to bring too much attention to myself. The question I begin with is, who do I belong to? Belonging is about where in the universe can one locate oneself? Is it to ourselves as individuals? Is it to our families? Is it to our immediate neighborhoods? Is it our towns and cities? Or is it to our provinces, to our country, to our continent, on our earth, and beyond that, the incomprehensible universe? And somewhere in this vast universe, we are somewhere as individuals, and somewhere as countries, as provinces, and so on and so forth. These questions point to something ever expanding beyond one's immediate environment, and one that enables one to become part of other environments that are real or imagined. Now, how would South Africans belong together? How do we meet the need for community? Indeed, to imagine an individual without community is very difficult, at least for me, and I suggest many of us. I would go on to suggest that humans in general are doomed to form communities, and human entities that socialize and continuously expand one's sense of self. It is about constant growing all the time, opening up oneself to new horizons and getting into them for better or for worse. Belonging is about the need for community. It is about being conscious of where one is, who one is, and what and are those who are those I interact with. How do they feel, think, and hope, individually, but more importantly, collectively? I think it is about what I feel in a complex of relationships with others. My particular perspective has been heavily influenced by the formative childhood experiences of growing up in what I characterize as a middle-class family in the township of my upbringing. You are highly likely not to have heard about the small township called, at the time I grew up, called Charterstone location, which is in the town of Niger, a gold mining town in the East Rand. And that location is my utmost enduring sense of belonging in and to a community, because almost everyone knew everybody else. In such an environment, privacy may be a difficult, even an impossible notion to entertain, except, of course, if you are in the privacy of your home at night when everybody has come back from school or from work to rest and be refreshed for the following day. So there was a sense of stability, despite the communities never having been consulted about where they were placed so close to these gold mines around us and the white farms also around us. And every day, my township, as countless others around the country, export their labors away from where they live and expend much of the day of work developing other parts of the country where they didn't live. And they go back in the evening, tired and worn out and washed out, to rest again for the cycle to begin again the following day. So later in 1994, the community of Charterstone was moved, as many others around the country, to Duduza, which was a new township that was far from being a place of comfort. In South African parlance, my community of Charterstone was replaced in favor of people designated as colored. But that would not be the first time that I would experience this. The other time, perhaps earlier, was when, having been born in a Western Native Township in Johannesburg, we were later to be moved to Moroka and another place called Rockville again. And so being moved without having had a say in it is the experience of many of us, and part of the story that we can tell to ourselves and to the world. Duduza, as you is a place that supposed to give Saka relief and comfort, but Duduza did not comfort. Worse, in that tragic time of our national life, the township made an unenvious history. We became the first place in our country where the gruesome neck-place form of killing took place. So obviously nothing really to be proud of, but it was a tragic situation that has become part and parcel of our history. So this Duduza, which is supposed to calm you down, my township and many others around the country were in fact rendered one anxious, insecure, edgy, and often very angry, frustrated, and uncertain. So names such as Duduza originated from forced dislocations of people who had not before lived together, never shared histories of being together, but who had to start from the beginning, from nothing, except empty homes that had a ceiling, had a roof, but no ceiling and no doors, and you had to make do to do the best you can to make towards a dignified existence. So how could people become then, when they were so deeply uncertain, anxious, fearful, with not much of a past to share, and then often angry and bitter? So we faced, on a national scale, we are faced with the historical reality of deceptions in the naming of many townships, and forcing you to ask, was there a cruel hand of cynicism in all of this? Or was there a misplaced sense of positive thinking, which may not have been fully recognized as being fundamentally false? I doubt it very much. I lean towards a negative intentions behind the namings, a fooling of people, or where they were allowed self-deceptions of a kind that may also have gone hand in hand with expressions of hope for the better, if the namings were actually originated from oppressed peoples, and they may have named themselves with these lovely names as an expression of optimism. And of course, I do understand that the names could have been intended as to be aspirational, depending on the story behind the naming, who did the naming, on what understandings, on what terms and circumstances. Can I remind you then of some of the examples? I made a good attempt at thinking of these names as randomly as I could without applying my mind. And some of the names that came immediately were Togoza, is the name of a township. Naledi, the Stars, is another one. Tembisa, supposed to be the place that fills you with hope. Katlehong, the place of success and well-being. Kayamandi, not far from us, here in Stellenbosch, was supposed to be a wonderful place of fun and joy. Such names, in the circumstances of the people who lived in the environments, where you can be looked at as a cruel mockery of those forced to live in them. So what was there actually in Duduza, to Duduza the spirit, the soul? And to the contrary, Duduza became one of the one of the first places where the necklace in form of killing actually took place. So such names were the opposite of the realities of the life in the communities they were meant to describe. Is it possible that such deceptions may offer a continuing contemporary challenge to contemporary South Africa? How, in the reimagining of human settlements, the deceptive way, these deceptive words came about to be the opposite of what they really meant about honesty, openness, fidelity, candor, frankness, truthfulness, trustworthiness, straightforwardness, scrupulousness, mutual respect, companionship, and optimism. These words posit a moving positivity. But as I said, this positivity was a graphic contrast to the conditions in which people lived. That is, the positivity in the words themselves were the opposite of the actual conditions of life. Can such words, merely words, offer some possibilities for reimagining our rural and urban settlements? Can the possibilities of such words galvanize us into achieving their fullest implications? Thus, us, we South Africans now, calling us to the full possibilities of belonging, because human settlements are about belonging. I assume that belonging is one of the basic human needs that that we experience, all of us, because the opposite of that is loneliness, being alone, which is an intolerable condition to sustain over a period of time, which is why I guess that is the origin of prisons, because in a prison you spend time alone, separated from society, from communities to which you belong. And it is amazing how so many people were able to spend so much time in enforced seclusion, and yet were able to retain optimism and the urge and the passion to continue doing better, when they came out of those prisons. So belonging is about expansive inclusion into community. It is about encountering what is at first strange and then transforming the strange into being familiar, the known into being known. It is about affinity and cooperation. It is about shared identities, about shared responsibilities. It is about relentless socialization into empathy, evolving collaborative, collective social conscience, which I call the conscience of belonging, but the inclusive social awareness, the feeling of being included, of solidarity, of group identity, and of open-mindedness as a habit of attitude and behavior. That is, being open to new experiences, to the experiences of others, to the voices of others, and to their pleas and entreaties, and of course at times to their scoldings and their insults and so on and so forth. All of which is part and parcel of what gets to making us who we are over a period of time. Now, all of this was designed to inform the design of the human environment under contemporary conditions. This is far from the mythical visions of combative collaborations of the exclusivist, constrictive, and escapist Orania type, and that Afrikaner communities' quest for exclusionary autonomies that can be at the same time tragically self-limiting, because whatever it is that you do about excluding as many people as possible, it goes hand in hand with the concomitant process of self-limitations being imposed on yourself. Then you prevent interactive growth. So belonging, I visualize as a geographically and psychologically expansive state of being. You become more than yourself as you become included in others and they become included in you. From this perspective, where do I belong? Is it to a locality, to a family, and to where that family is located in a township? Is it to a district? Is it to a province? Is it to a country? Beyond countries, you can have a collective of countries. I think reference was made to the regional entities, such as the Southern African Development Community, where a number of countries have, I think, knowingly called themselves a community in this part of the world, as belonging to the continent of Africa, belonging to the world, and the complex of global relationships that such belonging invokes, belonging to the universe, in the vastness of space, who could be our neighbors in that universe? How far and how near could they be relative to the seeming infinity of space? I often think about, from an astronomical point of view, where are there other forms of life out there besides us? No one can tell, but seldom do I look at the globe of the world and the universe as we have been taught about it, and often feel lonely about, in this vastness, who else is out there? It's hard to say. And I guess because it's hard to say, there is an urgency for us to, in this world that we know, to do the best we can to make it the best place that is possible. And I guess that is a challenge of being in the world, particularly now, being Africa in the context of the global environment. Okay, from 1960, my universe expanded considerably in various stages of growth. I went to boarding school in Swaziland, as you may have heard. I went to university in Lesotho, and I did my postgraduate studies in Britain and later in the United States. This resulted in a very significant international dimension to the growth of my own consciousness. And along the way, I became a citizen of Lesotho. The story of how I became a citizen of Lesotho is about how, in order to facilitate my ability to travel and to come to Lesotho at the specific moment when Lesotho was developing a policy of localization to develop its own cadre of local talent, it was fortuitous for me to be there at that time and to be in a country which was inherently cosmopolitan, because I found that many Basotho, of course, have been all over, not only in Southern Africa, but also around the world, and they had a cosmopolitanism that I warmed up to. So important was it that I treasure the first passport I got from Lesotho, even when I wasn't even a citizen. That enabled me to travel beyond my country under a new identity, built on the one into which I was nurtured in my childhood and adolescence. At the time then, I went to Lesotho, later to the UK. I was not a Lesotho citizen, but the university, in recognition of whatever it is of myself that I was able to achieve, made it possible for me to get a passport on the promise that I would come back to work in Lesotho when I had finished. And that is precisely what I did. And met a wife there, my children were born there, and reclaimed my citizenship when I had to come back home in the year after Madiba was released, and all felt and even more at a later stage were able to enjoy the pleasure of not having to give up my citizenship, because South Africa recognizes that you can have more than one citizenship. And so I still treasure my passport, although it's no longer valid, and I haven't been back to have it renewed. I guess there's not much need for that because my own passport can let me to go wherever I want. But it does mean that it was so important for me and for my identity to reclaim my citizenship and carry a passport of the land in which from which I was born. And born in Johannesburg, which is a huge city. And in contrast to the hugeness of Johannesburg, I grew up in the small eastern town of Niger, a mining town. And when you were there and you had relatives in big cities, like, Durban, Johannesburg, and so on, Port Elizabeth, you had coming from a small town, I envied people who were not at the edges as I were, but were right bang in the middle of this Witwatersrand, where the place of gold, which sort of set the pace for the rest of the country in so many other ways. And so travel was very important, because even better if you're able to visit your relatives and be able to talk about them to others. Perhaps one point of autobiographical interest to you all might be that my grandfathers were both priests. The one was a Reverend Peter Timothy Chabangu of the Presbyterian Church of Africa. If you visit the church's website, you will see a picture of my grandfather where he is listed fourth among a constellation of the leaders of the church in the 1898 to 1958 Ministers' Diamond Jubilee picture, and is described, my grandfather, as having been the secretary of the pension fund. So I guess he was very much trusted. Professor Khumalo, in that portrait, and next to each other, you will find the portraits of two men of God, both of them Reverend Khumalo, from Durban, and another one from by the name of H. Ndebele from Harry Smith. So I would say to Prof. Khumalo, like true Africans would discover a point of linkage, we might need to have a chat about where we both come from.
Wonderful.
They were listed in the three categories, right? Leaders and influential leaders of our history, and the third category, current leaders of the Presbyterian Church of Africa. If you look at that list, it is an impressive, awe-inspiring photograph, and it instills a pride of really where we have all come from, up to this point. The pictures show how the collective of leaders of the Presbyterian Church of Africa came from across the length and breadth of South Africa. There's Gqeberha, Tsomo, Alice, Brakpan, Cape Town, Aliwal North, Frankfurt, Libode, Greytown, Lesotho, Kroonstad, the West Rand, so among other places. It's huge geographical spread of this church, and the messages that this church will have proclaimed in all those places. I have a very faint memories of visiting our grandparents at Gwalanga. I think I must have been 8 to 9 years old. And remember that it was a long and tiring drive from Niger to Cape Town. And we broke the journey in Bloemfontein, where my maternal grandparents lived. But I don't have very strong memories of the mission house in Gwalanga where we stayed. But I do remember that my maternal grandfather, the priest of the Presbyterian Church, had a kind of booming voice and an amazing sense of presence. And on my father's side, as my paternal grandfather was a Walter Mbalegwa Ndebele, who came from what is known as the Christian Catholic Church of Zion, otherwise known as the Church of Mahon. This church still exists. A lot of branches I gather in Soweto and in a couple of other places around the country. If I was a little younger, I would have made a special effort to see these places where this church was, and hopefully to meet the people who still officiate and to experience what it's like to be in a service on a Sunday in one of these places. But maybe it is something that I can still do. But according to my hurried reading, the Presbyterian Church of Africa was founded in 1898 by the Reverend James Phambani Mzimba, who broke away from the Free Church of Scotland because of a misunderstanding between the black, white, and the black and white clergy. It is one of the oldest independent churches in South Africa. Initially, a new church, it was a small group of 2 presbyteries and 4 ministers, but it grew steadily. 15 candidates for ministerial education they were able to send to the USA in 1915. At a later stage, institutions for theological training in South Africa were used. The church has consistently stressed that all ministers must be trained before ordination. Since the church was all black, it had limited funds. Like other independent churches of its name, it had to struggle with lack of financial backing and government recognition. This Presbyterian Church of Africa now has grown over time without any outside help. Several of its younger ministers have opted for a tent-making ministry, pursuing other professions along with their pastoral work. That's end of the quote from the website of the Presbyterian Church of Africa, as I said, founded in 1898 by Reverend Mzimba. Now, in 1973, the General Synod of the Presbyterian Church of Africa accepted that there was no spiritual ground for remaining an exclusively black church. The Synod decided that the PCA, Presbyterian Church of Africa, as an independent community, should not remain isolated from the rest of the body of Christ. The church has a strong leadership without being clergy dominated. Its task is seen as belonging to the whole of the people of God, though it has a sense of its own charismatic gifts. The Young Men's Christian Association and the Young Women's Christian Association are active groups in the church. The Presbyterian Church of Africa runs several projects related to agricultural and community development, scholarships, work for the needy, human resource development, etc., without any outside assistance. One of the presbyteries, of the 9 presbyteries, one is in Malawi, and another in Zambia, and another one in Zimbabwe. In 2008, the Presbyterian Church of Africa celebrated its 110th anniversary. Okay, to draw closer to my objectives today, the theme of belonging, involves the experience of travel. Apartheid knowingly restricted the movement of Africans, despite the reality that the growth of South African capitalism required such movement. Despite their best intentions, they could not prevent capitalism's hunger for labor, and people traveled from all over the subcontinent to the big cities of South Africa, mainly Johannesburg, of course, but to others as well. I was pleasantly surprised to find that there is a Sesotho is still being spoken in parts of Gualanga and Khayelitsha and so on, but people who have been here for a long time, who originated from Lesotho, and were able to reproduce their culture far away from home. Belonging also involves a geographic location. It also involves property rights in townships and Black urban areas, to the extent that you could have such rights pre-1994, albeit it's rights that offered no security, that was long-standing. It is also about, that is belonging, about the experience of confinement and later of freedom, which is the condition in which you are today after a long process of struggle. Belonging is also about the experience of confinement, of freedom, of neighborliness, as opposed to isolation. The considered benefits of both rural and urban environments, and the structural symbiotic relationships between the two environments, which ought to exist in a complementary relationship, is also part of belonging. And so, lastly, is the experience of the local and external environments. So the thought of belonging has taken me across an entire country in my reflections, and a real question of where are we really today as far as belonging is concerned, and belonging to South Africa in 2024 in our different localities, and also sharing at the same time, despite the vast spread of the population, sharing a similar kind of hope and optimism for a future in which we are not fragmented, but a unity that also allows for the diversity that is impossible to neglect or to ignore, and the richness of interaction which a positive attitude can engender in the sense of belonging to one another, to the land, and how we meaningfully also belong to the land, and what does it mean for us citizens to belong beyond ourselves to the land, and what are the responsibilities of that belonging, and what we do to the land, and what the land in turn can do to us, provided we have worked out the best relationship that is possible between us and our national home. And I guess I should pause there with these reflections and open myself to the questions and the comments that will follow, and to thank you very much for the opportunity to be share my thoughts, and thank you, Professor Zide. You are the one that brought me into this group some time back, and was to be welcomed by Professor Kumalo, and to everyone else who is here to participate in this conversation and discussion. So thank you very much. Let me conclude there.
Yes. I mean, thank you so very much, Professor Ndebele, for these words. I mean, I personally, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of many here, I can listen to you forever. It feels like a beautiful storytelling around a fire in an African setting. Grandmothers sitting around and we're listening to one of us. And I loved how you weaved your biography to the context, and you also brought the church into it, because often we forget the enormous role the church has played and must continue to do so in shaping our societies. And even so, during moments like this one, perilous moments in any society, when we're sitting at a crossroads, churches must rise and meet this moment. Thank you so much. Before we get any comments and questions, I have a sweetener to Cho, your dear friend, Reverend Dr. Mvumelwano Hamilton Dandala. I've got permission today to call all his name. He will say a few words. One friend to another friend of many years. And if I may take the liberties that I had an opportunity to interview both of you on a different project. We're not going to talk about it here, a research. And one of the things that I must share with the audience, Professor Ndebele chastised me. So we're talking, and we're doing back and forth. And I'm saying to him, oh, no, Prof, that seems too formal when you call me doctor. You can call me Telela. And you said to me, no, you worked hard for this title. I insist, I'm going to call you a doctor. And I was like, oh, my goodness, I look up to him. But it was such a moment which reflected to how much you take really seriously the body of work. And I know that you spend wonderful moments as families at Cambridge. And years later, so much happened, and you're still dear to each other. Over to you, Reverend Dr. Dandala. A few words to your friend as we celebrate him.
Yes, Telela. I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank you for organizing this marvelous opportunity. As I see that Dr. Ndodomzi Gordon Zide is here too.
Yes.
And I want to greet him and thank him. He was the chairman of the council of the seminary where I was teaching in my last years. I want to say a very special word of greetings to Professor Ndebele. Professor Ndebele is truly the son of the soil. I recall our time in Cambridge. I am ever so grateful that when we came back to South Africa, we did not only not lose contact, but we also encouraged one another. We did not let go of one another. Today, talking about belonging, I just want to share here that Professor Ndebele did not only come back, but he belonged. It's not always that you will see a person who, after many years, can still talk this meaningfully about a place where he grew up in Niger. But throughout, in every situation he was in, he could explain why he is there, why he is not giving up. Even when he runs away from South Africa, you will still find a person talking meaningfully about where he grew up, talking about the people who cared for him, talking about the people who guided him. I want to say to Professor Ndebele, this is a gift. And not only a gift to anyone, but a gift particularly to the younger people who want to contribute something to South Africa. He went to Duduza. He talked about what life was like in Duduza. I want to say to Dr. Ndebele, everything he has been, everything he has sought to communicate has been a gift to this country. I hope that among the people who were listening to Professor Ndebele, there were younger people. He and I are now pushing to our 80s. Things we say have got to be heard by younger people. This has got to be heard and seen by younger people because what they have is not, it's not everything we should have. They will contribute one day when they look back and see if they have had an impact and see what life ought to be about. And because they look at people, they hear people like Professor Ndebele. They must make their contribution, remembering all the time that this land we are going to leave to other people, and therefore we must not leave it as we found it. During the apartheid years, he made his contribution. After 1994, he made his contribution. Today, he's still making his contribution. If you notice his voice, if you notice what he says during those moments, it's changing by bit to where it is today. And therefore, it is important that young people should see this and should understand that they have a responsibility. Let me go towards the end. He spent a lot of time talking about the church, about what the church did and what the church can still do. Now, I want to say first, Professor Ndebele is not a priest. He is a citizen. He can see all these contributions. But he talks about the church in a way that makes you realize that whatever he did and wherever he has been formed by the church. I worry when I see the ministers, if I may say, not realizing always that they have in their hands something that that the people will once look back at and thank them. I want to say to Professor Ndebele, thank you so much for taking all life and putting it together, and then looking at younger people and say, that is what I have done, that is where I have been. It is now for you to take it forward with an understanding of what things have made them. I really want to say thank you to Njabulo. I want to wish him well. I want to say to him and people like him, of all the things that you have contributed, thank you that at last, at the end, you are able to speak about the church that avails that which makes it possible for us to hold everything together. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, our elder brother, our, if we talk about Reverend Dandala, we talk about somebody who was really, really dear to the African society, to the South African society. Thank you so much. And I know, Dr. Dandala, that Professor Njabulo Ndebele is happy to see you here, as she is happy to see all of us. Thank you so much. We are running out of time. The comments we're getting, Professor Ndebele, it's people really appreciating the work you've done and appreciating the speech you have made today, and just wishing that we can have more of these sessions as people are learning a lot, especially the younger generation. So grateful. And I see a hand from Silailo. From Silailo, we will be heading to Bishop Siwa to respond briefly, and then we can close because we don't want to keep you long here. Silailo, yes, I see your hand.
Hi, Dr. T, and good evening to everyone. I think Dr. T is of a young person to listen to.
Your line is not good.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Okay. Yes, much better.
Thank you. I was saying that it would be amiss of me as a young person in South Africa who has grown up under the leadership and guidance of a father who has spoken about people whose names we have heard, but I know that I never thought in a million years that one day I would be in the presence of Prof Ndebele, whom my father has spoken about when we were younger, and we were bored with these with these freedom fighters, because we couldn't comprehend it. And this evening, I would like to, first of all, commend Prof Ndebele, to say to you, because Prof Ndebele, we say, it means that I thank you untiringly. I will never get tired of thanking you. Even when I am tired, I shall forever thank you for the wisdom that you, even this evening, comfortably, patiently giving to us as young people. And as a young people, I want to ask you something, because I feel as young people, we have lost it, both as parents and also even appreciating the freedom that we now enjoy. freedom that which you have fought for. And as a person who is in the church and loves God immensely and loves the church immensely, I want to ask you, Prof Ndebele, how can we as young people take from the cup of wisdom that we have taken from you and give to our children? Right now, a lot of my fellow friends and family members, our kids speak English more than we speak our own family language and our vernacular. We do not talk about the past like you have had to do. And I echo the sentiments of Dr. T when she said, it's almost like I am around the fire and I am drinking from the well and the cup of wisdom from my fathers and my forefathers. But I also feel like we have lost it as the younger generation. So to you, Prof. Ndebele, how do we now rekindle that light that we ourselves have dimmed for our children? How do we go back and teach our children the way you are now teaching us this evening? How do we sit patiently and tell our children what we had to go through, what our parents had to go through, what the church had to do? We see younger people now in these days saying, I left the church, but I never left God. But they don't understand what the church had to do in order for us to be where we are and for us to celebrate these freedoms that we today have. And so that is my question, but also saying, my father, I am immensely grateful to you. I don't know how to say it better in English because sometimes when you speak in your mother tongue, it gives you the essence. On behalf of the young people in South Africa and beyond. But how do we teach our children the way you are teaching us today, the way you continue to share in the knowledge? Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. T, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Slaylo. Prof Ndebele?
Ke a leboga mme, ke utlwisisa haholo, and thank you for your comments. It's always a tricky issue to move from playing with ideas and concepts to the what to do, because that in a sense in itself calls for a different kind of conversation that is focused on the doing. But I understand, I think I do, the sources of that question is, it's a question that I ask myself all the time. Consider, for me, one of the most important moments in recent times was the outcome of the national elections, and how a dominant political player over years was unable to win the majority vote, and forced into a situation that could have and should have occurred somewhat voluntarily, because the vision that has kept the country going over the many decades since 1994 required a sense of urgency from as many of us as possible to explore the possibilities of a new political environment in which the outcome was as it was. But I think that the outcome also came with opportunities, because it meant that we have to work with a reality in which all of us with very few exceptions, felt vulnerable because in the absence of a majority political environment, a political environment in which the majority held sway for so long, we had a totally unexpected outcome in which all of us have to renegotiate our relationships in some very fundamental ways to think very seriously about where we are going and how to get where we think we need to go. So I think that the one thing I could say in response to the comment and the question is that we have to stay focused on the fact that the sky did not come crashing on all of us, and for me, that we are still here and we did not disintegrate is very important, because it means that there is a center, a core of a shared sense of stability that we desire, but may not fully comprehend and understand. And possibly we say, what to do today is how do we work with this new unexpected experience of vulnerability, and what do we learn from it? What adjustments do we have to make in our own thinking and in our doing? There are many things that we committed ourselves to do, but may not have not succeeded to the extent that we really wanted to. And they include what does it mean to be a South African today? And to be a South African today is, I think, it's about some of the things that I talked about, that a willingness to move away from the heroic mode that we're schooled in over the years of struggle, to a mode much more realistic about what's available to us, what we have in ourselves, and what are the best possible ways that what we have can be put to the best possible use. I think that if I were to sort of thinking on my feet, how is answer the question, how do we re-experience the sense of nationhood given the outcome of the last elections? How do we secure different types of majoritarian politics that takes us on a new footing? Because we cannot be who we have been over the last couple of decades, because the future calls for us and the outcome of the elections to envisage something totally new. What it is a matter of how ideas flow between us, and the institutions of learning and culture and business that and community living that come together to answer this question that not myself as an individual has the ability to answer, but that we all need to take into account the realities of the last. To me, the last elections were a wake-up call. But I also have to say that to add that the greatest achievement of the last elections is that we did not collapse as a country. We are still there, and that the possibilities we have around us still face us, that we have to make the best possible use of this outcome to envisage a different kind of living together. And that means careful listening to one another, taking into account, I think we have a young people. The young people of this country are an enormous gift to South Africans. Everywhere I turn, I see enormous talent. One of the questions is, are our institutions ready to nurture this talent in ways that work with the new sense of optimism that emerged? I'm happy. I'm still fairly happy that we are a nation that talks a lot, and we listen. We may not always listen to one another carefully, but we nevertheless talk, and the voices are being heard. And the challenge of institutions is, what do we do with all these voices, with these impressions? What is it that actually keeps us together? The center, there's a comment here about the center that held its position will one day pass the baton. It's so true. I mean, the center has to hold, but we have to constantly ponder the center. What is it? What are its opportunities? What are its limitations? And I think that my thinking this evening was along the lines of saying, what indeed do we do with a knowledge of where we have come from, a knowledge of where we are now, which, according to me, has enabled us to keep our sense of optimism, despite the fact that we're not quite sure what next. And I think it is the question, what next, that should, I think, hold our attention. And because we've got to find the solutions to the questions. And I feel optimistic that we will. There was a reference to, we have a lot of young people, extraordinarily talented people who are young in our country. They're under 30s, they're from the mid 30s downwards, and a lot of wisdom among the over 40s to the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, where some of us currently are in the middle, and of the 70s. And I have to thank you very much for the opportunity to see my old friends that I haven't seen in a long time, to hear Mvume talk, and to see Phumzile next to him. It has been lovely to see you, and it's a great pity we live so far apart, and it's not easy to travel these days, but it's wonderful to see you, and thank you, Professor Njabulo, for all this.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Ndebele. The last part, there's so much to puzzle through it, but time is a thief. Because when we talk about this moment right now we're in as a country post 29th of May, it requires not only reflections on the GNU, but what would happen, what is likely to happen. I wish we had more time, but under the leadership of Professor Khumalo, I'm sure there will be more time, Professor Khumalo, to tease out really critical things. One of the things that Professor Ndebele, as I come to Bishop Siwa now, he says we must continuously ponder about the center. And I was breathing heavily at that point. So profound. at the center that governs, the center that can be anything else, and we're also in between that or around it. And as we continue to build our societies, but I don't want to waste your time. Bishop Siwa, we're at the end of our session. It's going to be Bishop Siwa, and then we close after with Pumlani. Bishop Siwa, can you hear me? Can you hear us?
Yes, Dr. T, I can hear you. Good evening, Professor Ndebele, and yourself as the director and everybody who is here. It's a special privilege indeed to be asked to respond to so much that has been contributed by Professor Ndebele. Am I, can you hear
Audible.
me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear, Bishop.
Lovely, lovely. Let me make a few comments because of the time, as you said, Dr. T, is that, first of all, let me say that it was in the years 1972, 73, that I was a student at the Nathaniel Nyaloza High School in the now Makanda city. And there I interacted with teachers like Mr. Dan Siwisa and people like Desmond Madlavo and many others. Then I had a brief period at Forte where we were engaged with the then SASO, and then only formally, I say formally, joined the African National Congress in 1989. I say these brief comments that when I was expelled from Forte, I went to King Williamstown where I interacted with our beloved Bra Steve Biko. And so as I make these comments, I want you to know that they come from that kind of background, a background that for now I miss that open, free, non-partisan engagement without blindly aligning to any personality thinking, but integrating the thinking from various people who were speaking or guiding or leading or influencing from the lived experiences of the people rather than promoting themselves. So I take my head off for Professor Njabulo Ndebele, because I have really followed him over many years, and I am mindful of the illustrious journey which is there in the public for everyone to follow if it is necessary. A fitting background to the contribution this evening. And some of the takeaways for me is that what is in line with what we were engaging this evening is a lecture that Professor Ndebele gave way back in 2000, the Steve Biko lecture. And the title there that captured my imagination is Ipindlela. Where is the way? Finding the way. And he called it then as a fitting metaphor for what our country was going through at that time. And I want to add that going through, as we gather this evening, finding the way into the future. And I'm excited. I had the clear call to all of us to strive to find the way into the future. Encouraged by the journey of the legends. Yes, analyzing the present is crucial as a continuous launching pad for the action for shaping the future now. It is encouraging to be reminded that we are not lost. We are not lost. This is my view as I was listening. We are not lost at all. We are not in the jungle, but have what Father Desmond Tutu said. We need always to have moral reference points and to have persons like Professor Ndebele sharing openly today remind us that we do have moral reference points. Some of us suffer from what Dr. Mampile Rampele said, we suffer from wounded consciousness. And I like that phrase again because we sometimes miss the target towards finding the way because of our woundedness. And so therefore we need to find and focus on the guiding lights of our reference points, including Professor Ndebele and many others, who are indeed blessed beyond measure, as Nelson Mandela said. And again, you know, as I mentioned that from my own background, I am excited by a number of people that God has given this country. You know, that young fellow, Shomelo Biko, wrote in that insightful book, The Great South African Society, The Great African Society, where he says, South Africa's path as society headed into peril can easily be diverted into direction to a great society. And I add, not simply harboring pain and distractions, but finding the way. We encourage this meeting to harness and unlock what we have. We do have what it takes to lead us into a great society. It has dawned on me that droplets of individual contributions and action can turn the tide more than the verbose utterances of the powerful, which at times can be dangerous and launch the world into chaos, confusion, and despair, as we are experiencing today, not only in this country, but around the world. The verbose utterances of the powerful, which confuse and are sometimes taken as the text. So we are reminded this evening that we need to be constantly growing all the time, conscious of where we are, and having an integration of all thoughts, including the young, the middle, and the aged, the experienced, the intellectuals, the non-intellectuals who are experiencing what matters most on the ground, who cannot even articulate it or be listened to. And this will need social influence not to be one directional, but a two-way process, setting itself as a critical stabilizing factor as we're negotiating change in the context of the global environment. But the guiding light is the hunger for justice, and that is the healing hunger, more than hunger for self-promotion. People like Professor Ndebele never strive to promote themselves, but they just lived a life from which all generations can learn. And the literature is there, and if you can just Google Professor Ndebele, you learn so much, and begin to understand where he comes from and glean from the journey of his life, which I've experienced as a down-to-earth, impactful living, and not meaningless verbose utterances. Who are refreshed, who are encouraged and called to keep on keeping on drawing lessons from the lives of these moral reference points, like Professor Ndebele said. Allow me to say, we salute you, sir. We acknowledge your contribution towards a better future for all in all areas of our existence. And I guess it is not only myself, but many of us who commit to follow the lead that you have briefly expressed this evening, mindful of the time constraints. Thank you, Dr. T.
Thank you so much, Bishop Siwa. My goodness, such an insightful reflection, and we really been blessed this evening. We're sitting at the bottom of your feet and really immersed in so much wisdom. I'm listening to your own response, and it's taking me down memory lane. And perhaps as this generation and the ones who come after us, we must be grateful to God for gifting us with the likes of all of you. And really thank you. Many of people here, Professor Ndebele, as I bring the last speaker to thank us and then we close, whilst he's young, he was telling us that he read one of your books in high school. And I was like, when did you go to high school? I think 1995, something like that. And isn't that wonderful? Many here have read your books, but they couldn't put the name to the person, the author. They know the author, they know the work of the author. Goodness me, is he one that we read the book? Yes, so they are here. Pumlani, please, on behalf of all of us, express a word of gratitude.
Thank you so much, Doc. Good evening to all the esteemed guests, distinguished speakers, and participants. Yeah, mine is a very minuscule one. You see, as an African teenage boy, Prof, this was the first time in English books, as an African child, we were introduced or exposed to an English text. And it was a text about a prescribed textbook about a dreamer called Bonolo and the peach tree. Not be known that at some point I'll come full circle and meet the actual author of the book. And we were the first grade 8 after democracy in 1995. And Prof T is correct. So with that being said, on behalf of the Center for Constructive Theology and all of us present here today, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to you, Prof Ndebele, for your insightful reflections and for sharing your wisdom at this Second Legends of Freedom seminar. Your contributions, Professor Ndebele, continue to inspire us, much like your literary work, including Bonolo and the Peach Tree, which was my prescribed textbook, as I've alluded, when I was in grade 8 at Rossborough High School here in Durban, KZN, and has left a lasting impact on me personally and many others, my peers. You've been, I read when I was doing my Google research, you've been cited by one R. Manjushre, an associate professor in English from Alvas College in Modbidi, based in India. And he cites you along the likes of Eskiam Pahlele for his work, Father Come Home, work from 1984. And so with your book as well, Bonolo and the Peach Tree, when she reflects on African writers who write in English for an African audience, which I think it was a revolutionary work back then. So your ability to capture the complexities of freedom, identity, and human experience remains deeply resonant and continues to be a source of reflection for new generations. Someone once said, to see far, you must stand on the shoulders of a giant. We indeed are standing on your shoulders, Prof. Prof, we honor you and we are fully indebted to you. We thank you. And also a special thanks to our discussion anchor, Dr. T, Reverend Pumelele Yeni for the opening, and Professor Zide for the introduction of our guest. As the slang for young people say, you were cooking. We also appreciate the words from Reverend Siwa and on behalf of the CCT group. To our participants, both here in this Zoom and those joining us via the live stream, we thank you for your engagement. It is your participation that makes this event, the events like this, truly special. And we carry the lessons learned today to our communities, continuing the legacy of freedom that has been so eloquently discussed. Lastly, a huge thank you to the organizers for making this seminar a success, a success, and a special mention to our brother Mandla Mkhung. We look forward to many more opportunities together, learn and grow together. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you so much, Phumlani. That's the youth, Professor Ndebele and Bishop Siwa and Bishop Dandala. So they are here listening and learning. And it turns out they've also read your books. They were prescribed in school. I don't know whether you have a parting message, Professor Ndebele, before we do benediction and then we will be exiting the Zoom. But I'm just thinking, any parting word, and then we'll ask Bishop Siwa to come back and offer a benediction for us, and then it will be a wrap on my side. And truly, truly grateful for this moment. It has been a teachable moment and a humbling one for me to be sitting at your feet. Thank you so much. Over to you, and then Bishop Siwa, and then we end.
No, thank you. Mine is to thank you for making it possible for me to share some thoughts with you this evening, and I appreciate the opportunity to have done so. Whenever invitations of this nature come, they also an opportunity for one to reflect and sort of take away time, a little bit of time from the humdrum of every day, and spend some time on deep thought on some issues. So I've appreciated the opportunity and thank you very much. But I have to also say that I have to say thank you also for bringing to me my friends, the Dandalas, to have seen them today after a long time, and we have all pushed through through time, and are still there to appreciate one another, and best wishes to you, everyone who has been present, and all the best for the future.
Thank you so much. With that, those kind words from Professor Ndebele, we then ask Bishop Siwa to pronounce a benediction. And then after that, so we can open our cameras and then we say bye to everyone. Over to you, Bishop Siwa.
Thank you, Dr. T. Let us pray. May sessions like this one this evening, led by Professor Ndebele, generate energy into shaping the future, encourage even the youngest of the young. We are grateful to God for gracing us with these leaders who have gone before us. And so as we move forward, may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forever. Amen.
Amen.
Amen and amen. Cameras can be on to say hi to everyone. I saw Reverend Njabulo somewhere. I saw many people, so you can say hi. I think Professor Mila,
Thanks, Prof.
for many people here, friends. But thank you so, so much. Thank you. And good evening to everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you, colleagues.
Adios, everybody.